Hi everyone. I know some of you on the call, but for those who see me for the first time, I'm Katya Dan Vladimirova. Don't be confused by the very long name that you see. I don't know how to change it. Um, so I'm a senior researcher at the University of Geneva and the founder of the International Research Network on Sustainable Fashion Consumption. And I work on the issues related to responsible consumption patterns, including the secondhand as part of collaborative fashion consumption.
Hi everyone. Yes, my name is Dina Lingas, and I'm a consultant at the Norion Consult here in Denmark, in Copenhagen. Um, and I've also, for full disclosure, been part and involved in iKeep a couple of years ago, at the very beginning of their circular journey, and through there got to know iKeep. And today I'm here because I've been part of writing a report on the export of used textiles from the EU together with the EEA, so the European Environment Agency. um, and that's the relevance today.
Great.
Nice to be here.
Hello, everyone. So from my side, I am Calliope, and I've been working for iKeep for the past 1.5 years. As I was saying before to Katya, I started as a sustainable fashion enthusiast, if we can use this term, and that's how I met iKeep and Petros Timotheou, which is the founder of iKeep. So basically, the reason we're here today is an open talk we decided to do with Dina and Katya with the topic of used textiles, and more specifically, the exports of used textiles out of Europe. Now, maybe, okay, I use the term the fate of used textiles, and it might sound dramatic, but so are also the pictures and the videos we see every day through LinkedIn and on the internet, with the big mountains of trash, including textiles in there. So I thought of just bringing us together in the context also of the Fashion Revolution Week and of the Earth Day to just discuss a bit on it. Thank you, Katya, for being here. And also personally, thank you, Dina. I can maybe let you speak a bit about the report instead of me presenting it, and tell us a bit in what you worked on with your team.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's like first to say, I'm working as a consultant and I'm working solely with textiles. So textiles is what I do all day, every day. And even I was very surprised when I realized when the EEA kind of launched this call for a report about what happens with the textiles that we export from the EU of the used textiles. I was also quite surprised how little we know about it. We think that we have such a good tracking of, everything, like the global trade of everything. And then we started digging just a little bit, scraping the surface, and kind of realized how fast the trail kind of ends. So I think that's also why this topic is super interesting in terms of traceability and control, and all the efforts of the EU to do something, and all the efforts of so many NGOs and scientists and researchers to kind of, and consumers for that matter, to kind of to get a more sustainable fashion industry. But of course, that's very, very hard when we have no idea what happens once it leaves the borders of the EU. So what we tried to do was to understand, based on a like on a very kind of helicopter view, so not digging into like case studies or ground research, but looking at the trade data. So what do we know from everything that is reported on of trade? And used textiles is, and this becomes a bit technical, but it's registered as two different codes in the system. Shortly said, it's either if it's secondhand so that it can be reused, or another code if it's considered scraps, so more textile waste. And what we found was that there are specifically like 5, 6 countries in the EU that exports 75% of all the exports from the EU. So they are acting as some kind of collection points from all the EU countries, and then they are the ones who are exporting. So you can think of them as quite like hubs. The second thing we realized was that the last 20 years, first of all, the the export of used textiles has tripled. So there is a huge challenge of quantities that we're talking about. But secondly, we also found that there is an increasing specialization of which countries are receiving it. So whereas 20 years ago it was more diverse. So more countries were taking a little bit each. Now we're seeing a huge specialization where especially Asia is on the rise. So African countries are still importing the most, so 46%, but Asia has the last 5-6 years like rapidly not soon overtaken and now at 41% of all the exports from the EU. So what we see is that it's not European clothes that are found in Chile and South America and those kind of reports, but ours are mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and in Asia. And the third main thing is that the trail kind of stops there. So also, of course, you could research even further and try to understand like where does it go from the receiving countries, but it becomes very complicated. And we also know that a lot of it does not necessarily end up in a very sophisticated waste management system. So what cannot be actually reused ends up polluting a lot in the receiving countries. So that was a short run through of a big topic, yeah.
All right, thank you for the introduction. So let me just let everybody know that you can just collect your questions and throw them in the chat. And then in the end of this session, we can have a Q&A 5-10 minute slot. For now, maybe I can start with my questions. So probably I can just take a step back and ask you. So you mentioned already that our clothes get into these two big categories. So it's either secondhand or trash, as you said. So may I ask you, who are now, both of you actually, like what mechanisms do we have right now to collect back the used textiles from our households and generally from the market? Like I'm a consumer and I'm not from Mars. I know what I should do probably with my the clothes I no longer need. But can you make a brief introduction of how are our clothes collected right now? And it would be also interesting to see, Katja, from your perspective in Switzerland, and Tina, from your perspective in Denmark, I guess, if there are any differences in how this is currently taken care of.
Yeah. Well, like this, the collection scheme is quite in Europe, quite dominated by charities, and that's been the business model of charities for many years, right? So they collect secondhand or clothes for secondhand, and then that's where they get their profit from, which they then use as for charity. So that's kind of one of the other myths in that many people think that when they donate to charity, it's mostly that they're donating that exact shorts to someone who is in need of a short in a third world country, right? Like that kind of thought. Whereas in reality, the donation of clothes is merely a medium for the charities to earn money. Of course, they also do donate, but that's more like in crisis situations such as war or emergencies. So in Denmark, at least, you have a lot of those containers, mostly in the street around the city. Very little separate collection or like household collection. And then, of course, you have this increase in some chains like H&M where you can actually come and donate, and then you get a voucher to buy something new.
The so-called take back schemes.
Right, exactly. Take back schemes. So they're on the rise, right? But then from 2025, there will be a mandatory separate collection of textiles in Europe. However, that might be in Denmark, they're starting to kind of play around with it, trying to introduce it earlier. It's been delayed a few times. It seems to be harder than we all thought, where they want to collect only only textiles for recycling. So they're trying a system where the consumer is going to have to know the difference between clothes that you're like should go and are good enough to go to reuse, and you should know the difference between that and what should go to recycling and what is not even good enough for recycling. So as you can hear, I'm a little bit skeptical to people's ability, and also what like affect like how can we expect anyone or everyone to know such a technical difference, right? So, but that's at least how Denmark is trying to do this separate collection. So we are going to see as a continent and as a region changes coming in terms of how textiles are collected, but we don't know yet exactly how. I don't know, Katrina or like Katja, what do you have?
Yeah, and I've done a big research project funded by the City of Geneva. We're launching the report tomorrow, but a sneak peek into some data points indicates that we also have our current urban system is dominated by charities, and actually what I'm speaking about now is it holds for most large wealthy cities, and this comes from another comparative project we're doing among 9 OECD cities with research partners from the Sustainable Fashion Consumption Network. But Geneva case is very, very typical. We are not even as advanced as Denmark. Switzerland is not thinking yet. Switzerland is not European Union, so Switzerland has its own things happening. And these things are not as active as in the European Union. Right now, it's charities collecting 100% of donations, and about 65% of all the donations, 67, 2/3 roughly, are sold in closed bales. It's not something that charities have the capacity to process. They see an enormous increase over the past 30 years. Between 1994 to 2023. In 1994, they collected 250 tons per year. In 2023, last year, in 22, they collected almost 3,000 tons. So it's a 10-time fold increase in the numbers of collected textiles. They all are collected, 95% of these textiles are collected through donation bins. And one of the findings that comes out very clearly is that from the consumption standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, uh, of course, those who donate clothes are critical. I agree with Dina in terms of competencies expected from them in the future. But right now, I'm sorry, having like a container that clearly states, please put clean, good quality, good condition clothes. And I've been in the facilities that sort this clothes, and volunteers, by the way, reporting that we regularly find something wet, something so dirty that like I don't even want to tell you what it was. It was so horrible, and that contaminates the whole batch. So that shows us the low culture and low understanding from the consumers at this point, and also points at confusion, really. People don't understand. They have, a PET bottle recycling, they have a glass recycling, paper recycling, and next to it, there's a container that collects clothes. And with the lack of containers for clothes that is in no longer usable condition, that's where it goes, because research shows that many consumers still have this, they're embarrassed to put clothes, even if it's not in a good wearable condition, in the general bin.
Yeah.
So we have lots of issues to navigate right now.
No,
Yeah,
exactly. And
definitely.
it's like I think when they've done these like picking analysis of general waste or municipal waste, both in Denmark and Norway, like they find quite little textiles compared to how bad we are at recycling everything else in many ways. No, hello, little doggy.
Sorry, otherwise it's gonna whine. He's just the only way to keep him quiet. Sorry, ladies. Until
No worries.
No, like so people do kind of they throw socks with holes. I think we're there that people understands that no one else wants these. But for a lot of other things, like there's this kind of disbelief, a little bit continuing what I said earlier, that you're donating, you're being kind to someone else that will take this item. And somehow a lot of people also think that, oh, I know that this shorts is lacking 3 buttons, but I'm sure someone will find value in it and fix it. So we have this completely like skewed view on what is valuable also for others, because the logistics and the value chain for preparing something for reuse is really not there, and there's a huge gap in terms of systems there. So we have charities that facilitates reuse, and they're doing an immense job sorting and trying to, you know, get as much for their sake money out of it, because they live on this money to do their mission. And then you have, well, you have for energy recovery a very well functioning system, but you have really little for recycling as of yet. It's like on the like jumping block or somehow, like it's gonna get there. But then you have even less for the whole concept of preparing for reuse. So everything that is not reusable directly, it falls between between two chairs.
Maybe an example of the absurdity, the extent to which it goes, sometimes the lack of understanding and like just consumers being, let's say donors being unaware sometimes. It's a bit radical, this example, but we had a big, like in many countries in Europe, a big influx of refugees from the Ukrainian war last year. And the charities gave a special call. We really need winter clothes. You know, we need to collect clothes to give to people in need right now, right here with children. And there was a big, community return. Lots of people came, brought lots of stuff. But among the stuff that they brought, there would be like bikinis, for example. And you'd be like, what exactly were you trying to, like, what kind of point is that? Like, are you joking? So it's not to say, like, I don't think people have bad intentions. I just think that there is a lot of confusion around what happens with secondhand textiles right now. And I feel that we are at the same spot, let's say, as we were with the supply chains of the fashion system. We were like 10 years ago around the Rana Plaza collapse, when there was really a few people knew about modern slavery and toxic pollution, environmental pollution. Now we are reaching this, like we're just starting to unravel, to open up the obscure, actually totally dysfunctional post-consumer value chain, which also needs to be taken into account into LCAs, which needs to be taken into account into any sort of responsibly made textiles, designing for recycling and whatnot. But from consumer standpoint, I do understand that it's not clear at all. Where does it go? And I think many consumers still are feeling confused that, okay, but if it's completely unwearable, do I really throw it out with the rest of my, like with general waste or not? And they feel reluctant to do so. But the truth is that for most things, with the shorts with missing buttons, like Dina gave an example, what I keep telling my, I speak here in Switzerland, France frequently to general audience. I say, if you personally are unwilling to change the zipper, to add those buttons, to fix this hole, assume that nobody else is going to be willing to do that. So most people are still not at the level of awareness.
No, and I think that's super interesting in terms of like that clothing and textiles to still have some kind of value that we do see differently and compared to packaging, for example. Like it's quite interesting how polyester textiles and packaging, they're made both from plastic, but still like people are way more reluctant to throw textiles in their like municipal bin compared to packaging, right? So which I think we can also use for our advantage when working with this industry and this topic, because people do see clothes, they know from, even though it's cheap in Primark and etc., like, oh, there's something there, and we can really kind of leverage that to keep the value kind of come blossoming up again, because it's not completely out of the way. Yeah. Sorry, we're just babbling, Calliope. You also need to jump in.
I'm sorry. I'm happy because you already made a bridge to the topics of responsibility and transparency. Like I think it's really important to talk about transparency, especially because a lot of brands face now the difficulty of choosing a path. So how transparent can I be? Because they are really afraid of jumping into a wagon and just share everything about what they do, but then again accept the criticism of the limited according to some actions they do, because there will always be some people that are going to criticize how much effort and investment you put into sustainability, and I'm not sure. Do you think it's clear what is the right direction for a brand right now to make the transition to a more sustainable or in generally the circular economy? Like, is there a path that someone can guarantee us to take to be more sustainable? I think a lot of people have different opinions on that. And I can never, like, I didn't find some people agreeing on this.
Yeah, this the sustainability conversation, the circularity is like a, 3 blind men or 5 blind men describing the elephant. Like everybody, whichever side you're coming from, this is the side you're going to see and describe, and then try to fit within. To me, my personal view, and this is the view that I represent in my academic work and beyond, and in my some of my activist attempts, is that the foundational thing to do is to limit the volumes of production. So the brands have to be very cautious about how much they produce. Without stopping the tap, we can't address the overflowing sink, which is a very typical example. We did a report with a think tank based in Berlin called Hot or Cool. The report came out in 22 November. It's called Unfair, Unfit, Unfashionable. And it was the first report to estimate, based on a consumer approach, consumption-based emission calculations, how much do we need what kind of actions are going to bring us to the 1.5-degree lifestyles when it comes to textile. And it clearly shows that unless we stop buying less, which should go hand in hand with producing less, there's no way we can secondhand buy our way out of it, or just putting lower temperatures for wash. The ultimate most important step that is 100% more important than any other is reducing the volumes. And then afterwards, of course, for many brands today, it's going to be very challenging. It goes contrary to the idea of growth. Growth today, monetary and profit growth, going hand in hand with the growth of volumes of production units, material units of production. However, applying the innovative ways, the circular business models that help us decouple revenue stream from the production of new, and those opportunities are in there, offering repair, offering your own secondhand resale, offering experiences as opposed to garments, or other creative ways. I'm not a creative person, but I'm sure once facing with the constraints of sufficiency, people in fashion will figure out even better ideas than the European Commission has right now. So it's about decoupling your revenue stream and introducing some other ways of making money. And of course, designing for recycling, because if we don't do this, the whole system collapses. If we don't keep in mind the end of life of the garment, the moment that you're producing it, if the designer is so detached, he has no idea of what's going to happen with it, he doesn't care, that's a bit of a root cause of the problem. I know,
Yeah.
Dina, what do you think?
No, but
Maybe,
definitely, no, but of course, and I think one of the topics or the concepts that are really, really important to understand in this one, like you are also describing somehow, is the replacement rates. So unless buying secondhand or recycling, producing new material, unless that replaces the production of virgin, it has no effect whatsoever. And it's like, it's not to be, pessimistic or anything, but like a secondhand t-shirt is not, it's not doing anything good for you're not saving the planet one secondhand garment at a time if the alternative is this one laying in a container at a warehouse or in your closet. That has no impact on the resource consumption on the earth. So unless you're buying this t-shirt and doing that instead of buying a new t-shirt, you don't have to buy like it. That's the crucial part of this. And I think
Absolutely.
when you look at like H&M having take back schemes and offering a voucher for you to buy something new instead, that does, like, it's counter to this whole idea, and it really does not have an effect on the system. So you cannot celebrate secondhand by new products, and a lot of people, they do that, like I bought so much secondhand, I can offer myself 2 new dresses. like as if it, and that's it. Yeah, that's just not something that works logically.
You're totally right. I think there's a confusion also in proposing this secondhand as a solution as being sustainable. Yes, it works if you're replacing something and not buying new, but many people see it as a also as a way of doing circularity, and many brands position secondhand take back schemes as their way of doing things circularly, which to me is not the case. Like if we see it the linear economy, voila, here's the linear, you produce, you sell, you use, you throw away. If you have if you have the take back scheme and secondhand reuse, you're going to go linear and then do one loop, maybe two loops, maybe three owners, but then it goes, still to the same dump. But it's different from the looping, resources, thinking through the product's design, materials, use, and all of the logistics associated with it, including reverse logistics. Then it's a whole different system for the brand to set up, and it's a whole different experience for the consumers as well. So this emphasis on secondhand is going to save. No, it's not going to save us. Yes, it's going to be bigger than fast fashion in 2028 or whatever in a few years, but only because secondhand consists of fast fashion that's been produced in these crazy volumes. So
No, exactly.
I'm glad about this distinction that you're making, Dina, that we have to be careful. We can't consume our way in either
No,
secondhand or
exactly.
new.
And actually, Stefan, who's one of the participants in the call now, and also my colleague, he just wrote that, yeah, we did a study on consumers, and people do really like to, in Denmark, that's what we found, that the ones who buy really a lot of used textiles also are the ones who buy a lot of new products,
Wow.
because it's kind of consumption either way goes hand in hand. Like, if you're a minimalist either or. So yeah, so which is a very sad it's a sad kind of realization to take in, to be honest. Yeah.
Right. Maybe a last question for me before we jump in the Q&A. So just to connect locality in the with the whole conversation. So let's say that designing for circularity is right now the best solution we have to just trying and make a change. What happens if we don't have the end of life solutions in the local markets? Like, what happens if I'm a brand and I start designing and taking into account the end of life of my products, but then in the end, I will never find the right recycler near me, like in my country or in, I don't know, in the European Union. I think, Dina, you mentioned last time that most of the recycling solutions are not here. So this is definitely a barrier. No?
Yeah, definitely. And it is, and I think so in a waste hierarchy, you prioritize reuse over recycling, right? But in the in this other study, this LCA for recyclers that we did recently, we found that if you are exporting used textiles to, for instance, Ghana, which is one of the biggest importers in sub-Saharan Africa, and again, these replacement rates, if you're sending them, but actually they're only replacing less than 10% of new products, you should actually rather recycle them in Europe, even though you're stepping over one step of the waste hierarchy. So, and because in Europe, like you have some up and coming chemical recycling, you have a couple. It's difficult. Like you have some mechanical recycling, but it's in Asia, for example, in Pakistan, that it's booming with the mechanical recycling, and then unfortunately, it's, you can call it maybe mostly downcycling. So it ends up being insulation, filling, industry wipes. And that's another thing, right? This myth or this belief that when you send for recycling, it somehow magically turns into new fiber and new thread, which is it. We do have the technology, but it is very, very hard to do in reality. Like you need very, very clean streams and input and technology. So it's
I think it's Textile Exchange published this number last year that globally less than 0.5% of all the the discarded clothes are recycled fiber to fiber into new fiber. So the scale of the problem is really massive. And when we say, oh, this greenwashing, it really pisses me off. you go to see the take back schemes and the large brands, and it'll be like, oh, we're collecting for recycling, this recycling sign. It's just like, it's just so wrong, because it's not recycled. It's sold out. It's exported. Actually, we're exporting our responsibility to someone else. I think when I was researching this over the past 3 years, the most the thing that upset and surprised me the most was the fact that we not only export it, like take it out of Europe, this waste, but we also sell it. Because usually for vulnerable countries to get our waste in terms of plastic, electronics, they are paid to receive our waste. With textiles, it's an unprecedented situation in which somehow the existing third-hand, commercial recyclers have positioned their power in a way that this is a valuable resource. Here you go, and then you see those mountains of non-biodegradable textile, in the textile dumps in
Which is
Ghana,
mostly
Kenya.
polyester, actually.
Yeah.
Polyester is a huge part of what is exported and sent to
Yep.
secondhand and sent to recycling because it's such a bad quality. Like in theory, synthetics are longer lasting, but they're viewed and valued way less than natural fibers, so that they are overrepresented in what we're exporting. And that is plastic waste. So we are in many ways exporting plastic waste, which is illegal.
Being paid for this. And by whom? As if we were being paid by let's say the government or large organizations. No, we're being paid by bail, but by small entrepreneurs who need to take out a mortgage, a credit, or not a mortgage, a credit, a loan from the bank to afford this $500 of bail, which he buys or she buys without knowing what's inside. And she opens it, and now 40 to 60% goes directly into the dump because the quality is so bad. So yeah, this recycling.
But should we clarify that a bit, Katja? Like, so yes, so like the used textiles is a commodity market where where the charities they collect and then they somehow sort. Like you're not allowed to export from Europe without doing some kind of rough sorting for non-textile items. But there's not enough, it's too expensive with manpower in Europe for the most part to do detailed sorting, which means that clothes are packed in bales, so huge plastic bags, tightly packed together, of around 100 kilos each. And in here, it's unknown the quality of what is inside. So the buyers, they don't actually know what they're getting when they're buying this unseen things. So they pay for it and then they open it up and see what's there and hope for the best, that there's more like sellable items than unsellable. And the interesting part, like you say, is that like, and I've been trying to understand, like, there must be something in it for them because otherwise you wouldn't continue buying it. It's not that they're forced to buy it, but it's like they're scraping the bottom of our trash, right? Trying to find the like the crumbles that are sellable. And in some way, it does pay. And when we were doing this study, we found a lot of reports also saying that, for example, in Tunisia, that's not sub-Saharan Africa, but still, like 96% of the population were buying and preferring secondhand clothes from Europe compared to the cheap fast fashion imports from Asia of new clothes. So there's like a quality perception as well. So European clothes are actually quite valuable. And you can also argue like, okay, what would they buy otherwise? Would they buy anything otherwise? And what would be the quality of this? So it's really not like, it's so complex. And about a month ago, I did a talk together with a Changing Markets Foundation who's been investigating underground in Kenya and really documenting how so much synthetics are thrown out and ends up in landfill and such. And on that webinar, there was a lot of people listening from Kenya, and they were really angry with us. Why are you as white people coming again and saying that this is a problem? None of us have said that this is a problem. You come and you make this a problem that you don't know about, trying to save us once again. Like there was it was very fascinating. So I think we also need to be very cautious of saying this is black and white, this is bad, this is not, this is good. It's just it needs to be better controlled. And I desperately think that we should stop sending like blind dates bales to these poor importers. Like everyone who is part of an economic transaction deserves to know what they're buying. Like that for me is incredible, insane. Yeah, I can see we only have some minutes left, so
Yes,
Calliope,
Dean, I'm
take it
sorry, I
away.
didn't want to interrupt, but maybe I can quickly jump in the chat and mention, yeah, some of the questions quickly. So, should dismantling these exports be considered, and how would that affect the communities in Africa and Asia that rely on these operations for income? I think you just referred to it on your last answer, but would you like to quickly, add something on that? Like, is it possible that there is a ban of exports anytime soon?
Well, there has been talk about it in the commission to ban it, and there are some politicians focused on that. I don't think I would encourage a total ban. I think ensuring reuse other places in the world is still part of circularity and enabling reuse. However, we cannot reuse ourselves away from this problem. So it also has to go hand in hand with a reduced consumption and a reduced export of secondhand clothes. Like, so in Ghana, I think they receive, what was it, 33 million pieces every second week for a population of 37 million. Like, it obviously does not go hand in hand. Like, or it doesn't fit. It's just a wave, right? So but of course, some things are reusable and does provide value, but it just needs to be way better sorted.
All right. So, do either of you have any insight or estimate on the status of legislating producer responsibility of the textile waste? I think this is a topic we might have another open talk about because it's a whole new topic, and we've been discussing a bit with Dina and Katja. But I don't know. Would you like to briefly refer on that, Katja? Like
I
the
think
producer responsibility.
yeah, in a very short answer is yes. There are some pieces of legislation that are being prepared. There is the general waste. There's a waste directive. There is some other piece of documents related, encouraged by the EU strategy on sustainable and circular textiles. Part of it, I think, in the green claims, there's also a little bit about waste related. I haven't can go into much detail here, but it's in the making. So we can just participate in the senses like to see how the decision-making process is being made. But we don't have much concrete to discuss just yet. Just wanted to quick comment on the ban. I am in favor of the ban, but I'm in favor of the ban of waste. I don't think we should be exporting waste. And in order to understand what's the difference like in what we're exporting, we need to sort it better locally. And in order to incentivize people to people and brands to have less waste, I think this is when the extended producer responsibility really kicks in. If the brand is responsible for what happens with their garments after the consumer is done with it, then it will be in their best interest to produce less actually, and to produce better quality and to produce for recycling.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. And I also think that and that is a bigger topic, but the whole extended producer responsibility, like what you've seen with the WE directive, so the electronics, I think it's of course it differs, but in Denmark it's like about 2-3 euros extra per item, depending on the item, which is, and I was I was at a webinar about it, asking like, okay, what does this pay for? What kind of waste management is this paying for? Because it cannot be a circular one. Like it does not cost 2-3 euros per item to actually prioritize repair, disassembly, actual high quality recycling. So is it paying for the shipment to other countries? Because that's not enough. And I think that's where the extended producer responsibility needs to improve in its ambition, to actually cover the real costs of the products,
Mhm.
which
Do
would
you
cover the proper sorting in Europe, right? Yeah.
Do you
Sorry.
both have 5 more minutes to continue with the questions, or would you like? Okay, that's great. Thank you both so much. So, what like are there any ideas or examples of how we could encourage brands to produce less instead of punishing them? Because I think everyone in the sustainable textile industry is kind of critical, and we end up being in two different poles, and then brands just stop listening to us because we're talking too much about total like stop of the overproduction. And I think this is a really crucial question, like how we could we encourage them instead of of scaring them.
I think the best way well, first, I really think that people should sober up. The brands should sober up and wake up, because we're at the, at the freaking poly crisis, and not listening is not an option. It's like an oyster's putting the head in the sand. However, I do understand, especially for medium and larger brands that have already scaled their production, it's so difficult to switch to anything. It's difficult to switch to circularity. It's difficult to reduce volumes, because their initial business model was developed in a way that relies on constant increase in the number of units that they produce. However, I think what European Commission can do, and what legislation can do, is to encourage them and to really make it compulsory to engage in other sources of revenue. So for a brand that is, if right now we have a textile, a clothing brand, if it starts, all a brand needs to do is to find a supplier of garments. They don't need to know the tier three producers, the suppliers. They don't need to know what's happening after. If, for example, to start any brand and do any existing brands, they are also required to provide repair services by law, or depending on the type of the product. They're also required to set up a secondhand resale platform on their channel. They're also kind of use what's appropriate to their product range and the product type. That would help them imagine their business model differently, and that would help them see that they can make money otherwise, and that this linear way is not the only way to go. But right now, because there's no sort of enforcement, there's also very poor understanding among the brands, because it's just a new kind of discussion. I think it's taking a slow, it's unfolding slowly.
I'm also a little bit on that side of not so much faith in voluntary initiatives, etc. I think it's such an engraved logic, this thing of you make business by producing and selling products. And I also think that as consumers, like we are starting to look for, like, brands can sense that there's interest in recycled content, in ecological cotton, etc. But it's like it stops kind of there, and it's not that I think consumers are really good at also voting with their money, because a lot of brands, they experience that if you do a survey, a lot of people say, no, that's important for me, but it's not like they see that necessarily on their earnings or the products that people choose. So, and I'm on Katja's side. Like, we have 7 years to turn the tide in our resource extraction on this planet. So we can't wait for them to figure this out on their own. And then again, I'm sure that with a legislative push, we're really good at adapting when we're forced to it, and then we're like, oh yeah, it wasn't that bad after all. Like, humans and companies that are made up of as from humans, we're just not so risk willing, right? Like, we like the comfort, we like the status quo. So
Yeah. And also it's about leveling the play field,
yes.
because those poor sustainable brands, I just recently read an article about this, saying that, we can't really survive if everybody else is Shane around, and then we are doing our best practice, but it doesn't, it's really difficult to scale with the algorithms of online search for e-commerce businesses. It's impossible. So leveling out the playing field would really make a big difference. Then those who already have started involving engaging into more sustainable, responsible ways, they will be ahead. They will be at a better footing than anybody else who's starting to start another Zara at this point. But yeah, the most difficult one will be for the bigger brands, and I think this is where most of resistance is coming, the middle and upper echelon of in terms of production scale.
Yeah, and definitely. And I don't think they have enough data, and that's going to be super hard for the big ones. Like, I've always been wondering why packaging is not naturally reducing because of, market forces. Why would you pay for unnecessary anything, right? As a company, why do you have two potato chips bags wrapped into another bag to sell two for one? Like, it just doesn't make sense in my mind. And then I was talking to someone working for a large retailer in Denmark, and he said that they have no idea how much they spend on packaging. And if you, yeah, yeah, right. And that's something that they're now trying to create a system for. And it was like, shit, you get surprised, right? Because a huge retailer, I was sure that they would know, but of course it's tertiary, so it's someone else's. They buy it, they don't know the cost of it, they don't know the weight of it. They purchase X amount of 500 grams beef, but they don't know the packaging of this, right? Um, so what is happening is that if you don't measure something, you also cannot and will not do anything about it. So for them to start measuring, okay, shit, we're spending this much on packaging, that's stupid. That's the message that goes up to the board, and you can actually start doing something about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with textiles. Like, you need to, of course, a bit of a different, because we want them to use not to save even more money on on their product, but like, yeah, it's the lack of information. I think these legislative actions can actually be helpful for the companies, because it does force them to get a better overview of their own supply chain.
And since I'm a researcher, I will throw this out. It's the first time I'm voicing it, but just came to me. What if it's from out there, but bear with me. What if we had a carbon budget per garment type? Because this is something we can calculate. This is something that is calculatable based even on the data that we have for the Hodokul report. It can be extrapolated, it can be tailored. But what if a brand that has headquarters in Europe and does the sales in Europe is told, the production footprint of your shirts cannot surpass 1.5 kilograms of CO2 emission CO2 emission per unit, it's probably less. So then the brand will be like, okay, if I produce it in Asia, it's going to be 10 times that.
Right.
If I produce it in Europe locally, I will fit, and I will have even, a credit that I could use for something else. But I think that could be a theoretical way of approaching, like separating possible garments by category. I mean, this categorizations exist. What kind of garments and what kind of, potential emission budget it could come up with. And that would also define if you're given a total budget per country, per company, or per sector, then we can subdivide it and see how far the company can go, not surpassing a certain level overall.
Definitely interesting.
This is how the new
Let's
policy was
refer to
born.
this again, Katja. I write this down for a topic on the next talk. So, are there any examples of sustainable clothing brands doing much to educate people on being minimalistic? Like, I don't know if you want to name any brands, but I guess, do you have any good examples? Like, are there any? There are many brands leaders that are trying to change our current economy, but yeah, I'm not sure. Where do you stand on that?
I think very few brands actually. Like there might be like Patagonia with its very famous jacket commercial, right? In the end, it's not like they have a different business model than any other brand. So like they might have different ingredients and somehow different and better ingredients, and what they do with their profits and foundation, all these things. It's not that it's not good, but their business model is not inherently different. So I think you have, yeah, rental sharing platforms, companies who who rent out like fancy cocktail dresses. That's maybe one example of something that is actually promoting not ownership, but using something. So you're a user and not a consumer. What else?
Yeah, I feel that many brands are put in this impossible position, that especially the young brands that are starting, and they don't have to be online. You know, I have these examples right in front of me here in Geneva. The very nice person, she brings in textiles sustainably made in Africa, and she sells clothes with African, different sort of regional patterns here. And she says, I need to spend around 40% of my time when I'm in the shop just explaining to the consumers why they should be paying more. And she's been doing it for 10 years and she's really tired. She's like, I don't want to be doing this awareness raising work. Why is this my job? It's not, I'm like, people are supposed to know already. And I believe that raising awareness, it could be part of the marketing strategy of the brands. It's true. Sometimes to understand better the value of the proposition that the brand is making, you need to get some more information. But first, I don't like that brands are, put in a position that they're forced to do it. It's really not a small brand job. It's more of a government educational, job that needs to be done. It needs to be incorporated in the primary, secondary, high school education. Not just right now at schools they have these modules on packaging, on plastics, on energy, on transport, but they don't have anything related to textiles and textile use. So this has to start early and it has to be integrated in the education for sustainable development at an early stage, so that when the person reaches this adolescence age, which is when the fast fashion shopping begins with the pocket money and the early adulthood, that they have something ingrained, already from their school curricula.
But then also, does it have to be the consumer though? Because I think, for me, it's like the reason I want to be part of a society where you have a central government, where you have people who are responsible for, taking care of X, Y, Z in the society, is to allow me to not have to spend my time knowing everything there is to know about so many different topics. Like, I know textiles taken me 10 years to get to this point of knowledge, and then I don't know about foods and I'm stuck at a supermarket. I don't know what I should buy. And of course, educate yourself. Like, sure, but you have the same with textiles, you have the same with food, with electronics, with paints, with housing, with energy, with whatever. So I think it's a big shift in also thinking that the government should, it should give benefits or incentives to those doing good. But I'm also very much in favor of the government setting a minimum bar. Like you simply cannot be worse than this. Like, so as a consumer, you know that it's not up to you to have the moral compass to decide whether or not
Absolutely.
you want to pay more for something. Like, at least the minimum is like, to scrap the worst freaking chemical polluting bleach materials and everything we put in our body. That should just simply not be there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The
I'm
editing
happy
out
you
of the
mentioned education because Alexia asked something related to that. So maybe I can just move forward to the next question, Alexia. So, on the idea of growth being linked with the idea of producing more, would you have any tools in mind to sensitize decision makers on a brand level on the idea of growth and the current model of economy, capitalism? This is a bit more, I don't know how we can make it in 2 minutes, but well, I guess you could generally give your opinion on can our current model of economy, capitalism, support a more
Yeah.
sustainable?
Well, I work on degrowth and sufficiency, and I'm probably biased, and I'm probably within the camp of the more radical thinkers here. But yes, of course, our planetary boundaries, what we've been seeing over the past 30 years is planetary boundaries, and our current model of development are not consistent. We can't continue using the capitalist model, economic model, into the future like this. So we need to start rethinking things. Some good proposals are coming out for companies. Raison d'être, so the mission of the company, which right now in some countries is legally fixed as making profits for the shareholders. I'm speaking about the US. In Europe, we're much more advanced, depends on the country. But in France, for example, there are options for companies to register as a company for non-profit purposes. So it is still a company, it produces money, but it produces revenue and profits. But these profits are just distributed differently. And the company is not pushed all the time to exist only in order to maximize and grow these profits. It's about sharing with shareholders, with stakeholders, and reinvesting in future projects and ensuring that people who are involved are being paid decent wages. I'm very happy. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want. I have like very many books and thoughts on this, but I will let Dina speak because I know it's endless otherwise.
No, it's fine. I think you covered, and I don't have much to add. So I think, yeah, happy with
We
it.
can wrap it up.
Yes.
Thank you both for sharing all these insights, and thank you all for your questions. Like I'm sure I didn't read all of them, but I can make sure to collect them and maybe make another talk on that. So thank you, Dina. Thank you, Katja. And
Thank you,
yes,
Calliope.
I hope I can upload this session on our YouTube at iKeep by tomorrow. And feel free to come back to it, and also feel free to connect with Dina and Katja, I hope, on LinkedIn in order to continue the conversation or just keep up with what they're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.
organizing this.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Anna.
I wish you a lovely day.
You
You
too.
too. Bye. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.